Chapter 35, Heal Me. Inside one of the dorm rooms, Peter was waiting inside patiently for either Vorden or Quinn to come back. Usually, he would have gone off with Vorden, but the way Vorden had acted earlier had given him second thoughts. Even if Vorden was worried about Quinn, it made no sense for him to attack someone as soon as they opened the door. It was irrational, and not just that, but something stuck out to him at the time. The fact that Vorden said that Vorden wasn't his name. Peter wasn't exactly sure what he had meant by that. While Peter was busy worrying about the others, there was a sudden knock at the door. "Are they back already?" Peter said as he answered the door. When he opened the door though, Peter immediately tried closing it, but a hand had come out and held the door open. "Looks like he's not here," Momo said, looking around the room. It was Momo who was at the door, and behind him, he had two other second-year students. Peter didn't have a good feeling about this. He remembered the last time they had met and how he had given Vorden a warning. Not only that, but one of the second-year students standing behind Momo, Peter recognized as well. When Vorden was taken away to the assembly hall, one of the second-year students stood outside as a guard and wouldn't allow Peter to go past him. "Well, since you're the only one here, why don't you come with us?" Momo said, "We have some plans and we think you might be the perfect person to help us." Peter felt like he had no choice but to listen. Momo was a level 6 user. He was stronger than any of the current first years, and he knew if he refused, he would become a target. Before, Vorden would have been able to help him, but not against these guys, they were too strong. Back on the school rooftop, Loop had just arrived to see his friend being held by what looked like some humanoid creature. Loop and Faye had agreed to meet on the roof to discuss about what combat classes they should change to, now that he and Brandon had been kicked out. When Loop had arrived at the roof, he was surprised to see his friend lying there covered in blood. It was dark, so it was hard to see clearly, but as the creature held Faye in his arms and was biting into his neck, he could see glowing red eyes. Loop's mind instantly went thinking that it was some type of monster, but that's when he noticed that the so-called monster was wearing the same school uniform as them. An object started to grow out of Loop's body. It was a long, thin white piece of bone that was the same size as a small sword. He pulled it out and threw it straight at Quinn. The flying sword bone flew straight at Quinn, but he knocked it away with his hand. Almost straight after, another piece of bone came at him, and behind it was Loop running right towards him. In both of Loop's hands, he held two white bone swords and swung them down at Quinn. However, Quinn managed to grab onto both of the bone swords, stopping them in place. When Quinn tried to use his strength to break the bones, surprisingly, nothing was happening. That was because of the difference in ability level. Loop was a level 3 ability user. The special substance he was able to create out of his body was stronger than that of a basic tier beast weapon. As the two were held in place, Quinn realized his strength was greater and started to push Loop back. When Quinn started to push Loop back, he quickly took in a deep breath and blew out. Straight after, white bone spikes had appeared on his body all over. The bone spikes had managed to pierce Quinn's body in several different places, but luckily he was able to avoid a blow to the head and his hands were protected by the gauntlets. 10 out of 20 HP. It was a strong attack and it had hurt Quinn badly. Loop retracted the bone spikes into his body and was ready for the same attack again. As he breathed in though, he could see Quinn swipe his hand like a claw. Loop ducked down and instead of hitting him, the attack continued to go past and the red lines eventually disappeared into nothing. "Let's see what you're hiding under that mask," Loop said as he stabbed one of the bone swords into Quinn's foot and then lifted another one at his face. However, Quinn decided to use all his strength to pull his foot from the sword. The bone sword stuck in his foot had ripped through his skin and tore through his shoes. His foot was now a mangled mess, but at least he was free. Doing his best to ignore the pain, Quinn jumped back a few feet to create distance between himself and Loop. This was bad. Not only did Loop have a strong ability, but unlike the people he had faced before, Loop was a good fighter. Quinn's sloppy skills weren't going to save him. Sure, he had more strength than his opponent, but that meant nothing if he couldn't hit him. 5 out of 20 HP. Blood Bank auto use. 10 out of 20 HP. 90 mm left in Blood Bank. In nearly an instant, Quinn's foot had healed. That's when he came up with a plan. 20 out of 20 HP. 70 mm left in Blood Bank. Quinn had used the rest of his blood bank to heal himself. With this, he would be able to bridge the gap in skill. As long as Quinn didn't take a fatal blow to the head, he was sure the system would heal him in time. This time, as Quinn rushed forward, he was no longer reserved about using his skills. He cast blood swipe after blood swipe, swinging his arms out. 14 out of 20 HP. He had thrown a total of 6 blood swipes in rapid succession. They had come out fast, and all Loop could do was defend with his bones. The first few attacks had been blocked, but Loop could feel how powerful they were. 8 out of 20 HP. After defending against the first 6 attacks, Loop thought he was done, but another 6 blood swipes came straight after, and his bone swords could no longer take it and eventually snapped. 18 out of 20 HP. 50 milliliters of blood left in Blood Bank. Seeing Quinn continue to rush forward after him and his bone swords were broken, there was only one thing Loop could do. He took in another deep breath, and just when Quinn was close enough, he blew out, making bone spikes appear all over his body. However, Quinn wasn't slowing down and continued to run straight into the bone spikes, piercing several parts of his body. At the same time, he threw a punch out as hard as could, sending Loop flying backwards. Then, to follow it up, Quinn released another barrage of blood swipes. 5 out of 20 HP. 10 out of 20 HP. 40 milliliters of blood left in Blood Bank. As each of the blood swipes reached Loop's body, he stood his ground, reinforcing his body with bones, but not long after he could no longer take any more punishment and collapsed to the ground. Opponent has been defeated. 50 EXP has been received. 130 out of 400. The fight was a lot tougher than Quinn had thought. The only reason why he was able to be as reckless as he was because of his blood bank. Quinn hated to think about how he would have fought if he didn't have the skill. Quinn then looked back at Faye, who was on the ground. It seemed like after being bitten by him, his targets would stay asleep for some time, which was a good thing, but now it was time for him to feast on a new person. Quinn walked over to Loop's body and cast his inspect skill. Brandon Richardson. Ability: Bone Manipulation. HP 1 out of 25. Blood type: O negative. Finally, Quinn was going to find out what use blood type O had for him.